My name is Jessie Maxfield. Thank you, Jim, for inviting me to present here today. In addition to Halloween and occasionally postseason baseball, the CABW is something that I look forward to every October. It is, of course, an opportunity to learn about the latest in bioassessment science, but it is also a social event as well. So over the next couple of days, you'll have a chance to meet some new people, catch up with some old friends, and I want to encourage you to take advantage of the social aspect of this event. So there's going to be an event at Blondie's tonight that was mentioned earlier, and I think there'll be more about that later on. So you guys should attend that. If you don't drink, get a soda pop, or if you don't drink soda, get a water. Hang out. And also, there's some long lunches that are provided, so I'm sure there's a few of you that are planning to eat lunch in your car by yourself. Don't do that. Hang out with some people. So, and I'm going to put in a plug for Jim's College of Bioassessment courses. I graduated myself last year, and they are entertaining and fun, as Jim mentioned, and you'll learn a lot. I recently found myself telling my kids something I learned in Jim's class about aquatic insects that breathe and propel themselves with their butts, and so thank you for that. That was a big hit. So I work part-time at the State Water Resources Control Board in the Division of Water Quality in the Water Quality Assessment Unit, and that's where we developed the California Integrated Report. So this is the report which satisfies our Clean Water Act requirements for Section 305B, which is to report on overall water quality throughout the state, and our 303D list, which is our list of impaired water bodies, or those water bodies not meeting standards. When I'm not working on that, I'm also one of the lead staff on the somewhat newly merged Biostimulatory and Biological Integrity Policy, which I'll be talking to you about today. The other lead staff person on the project is newer to the boards. Her name is Lindsay Sharik. There she is. So you'll be hearing her name more. And the project manager is my supervisor, Nick Martirano, which I don't know. He's a tall guy. Is he here? He's also a Dodgers fan. So he's not here, but anyways, he's the project manager. I did give an update on this project a couple years ago when it was only the biointegrity policy, and since then it has been merged with the also underdeveloped biostimulatory policy, and as you might imagine, some things have changed as a result of that, so I'll be discussing the rationale for this merge, what's been happening since the merge, and where the joint project is going at this point. And then I also, at the end of my talk, want to switch gears a little bit. I'm adding on another title here, to put on my water quality assessment hat and talk to you a little bit about how we have increased the amount of bioassessment data that we're using in our integrated report, and how we've incorporated the use of the California Stream Condition Index, or I'll be calling it the CSCI. So, and I know that a lot of you here today work to provide us with bioassessment data, so I thought you'd be interested in learning a little bit about what we're doing with that data. Okay, so here we go. These two projects were combined for multiple reasons, but primarily due to the overlapping reliance on the CSCI and ASCI, which is the Algal Stream Condition Index, as assessment endpoints for interpreting aquatic life health. Although it is subject to change through the process, the plan at this point is proposing to develop a statewide narrative objective for biostimulatory substances designed to protect beneficial uses from the effects of eutrophication and use technical tools that are being developed by SWRCB, who will be presenting in the next couple of presentations, to translate that narrative into numeric thresholds for specific stressors like nutrients. Part of the project will also seek to establish consistent methods for assessing biological integrity, both good and bad. The SWRCB staff will be presenting, as I mentioned, in the next couple of presentations, and you'll get to hear about all the cool technical stuff that they're working on. I don't want to steal their thunder, but you're going to see that they're working to develop the science that supports the selection of a statewide screening criteria, but also allows for the potential of flexible implementation options, which currently our management and our stakeholders have expressed interest in. As many of you know, California has a robust bioassessment program and has had one for many years. We have standardized protocols that have been developed and refined over the years. Algae data is now helping to provide a greater understanding of what is happening in our water bodies. Together, the CSCI and ASCI provide powerful tools for informing us about the health of our streams, and in particular, whether or not aquatic life uses are being supported. The main goals of the two individual projects remain intact. As I mentioned, our management is currently supporting the development of a narrative water quality objective for biostimulatory substances with numeric translators to interpret and implement the narrative objective. And the implementation that's currently favored is a coordinated watershed management approach to provide some flexibility. Continuing on with the goals here, we do realize that a watershed approach would be complicated and it's going to require a high level of coordination and communication with and among our stakeholders. And it might not work everywhere, but we recognize that it will likely take a watershed approach to successfully address the issues that are causing eutrophication in some areas. Additionally, the benefits of a watershed management approach will be the ability to address multiple water quality stressors and restore overall stream health while providing some flexibility in how this policy will be implemented on a watershed by watershed basis. Essentially, it acknowledges that a one-size-fits-all approach is not appropriate for addressing nutrients. So we've been dealing a little bit with this scenario here. The science and the policy development have been a bit out of sync. So we need the science to support the policy options, but the folks providing feedback on the science would like to know more about how the science will potentially be used in the policy. So some of our discussions have been difficult. We want to work more on some draft policy options before we re-engage our science advisory panel and our stakeholders to talk about the science. So once we merged these two projects, there was a need to re-engage our stakeholders collectively from the two different projects, and these stakeholders are representatives from various groups such as environmental organizations, members of the ag community, folks representing wastewater treatment plants, just to name a few. We kicked off our joint stakeholder advisory group meeting in December of last year, and then our joint internal regulatory group made up of members of our technical team and state and regional board staff kicked off last February. These groups have been focused on reviewing and providing feedback on technical products being developed by SWRCB, which Martha and Rafi will be talking about. These conversations would often lead to questions about what was going to happen with the policy and how would these technical products potentially be used. Unfortunately, we could not answer those questions, and that led to some frustration. So there have been also several long-term high-priority projects within the Division of Water Quality that were approaching completion in this last year, and that really overloaded our manager's ability for thoughtful review and input on all levels regarding policy options. So that, combined with the science actively being developed, has led to a decision to delay our meeting with our science advisory panel and to slow the pace of our stakeholder interactions. We want our management to give the project the time and attention that it deserves. It's also worth mentioning that we've had some pretty significant staffing changes in the Division of Water Quality. I think most of you probably know, but Karen Larson is now the head of our division, and Rebecca Fitzgerald recently replaced Rick Rasmussen, who retired as the Standards and TMDL section chief. So Rebecca worked for a long time at the North Coast Regional Board, and she has indicated that she's very interested in this project and looking forward to being able to focus more of her time and energy on it in the near future. So here's our tentative project timeline at this point. As you can see, it'll be some time before we have something that we will be taking to our board for approval, but that is a good thing because we have a lot of stuff we need to figure out. In the meantime, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what has been happening and see some of the documents on some of these technical products or even some webinars that we have recorded, we've been keeping our webpage up to date, and there's lots of good stuff on there. And I realize not everyone's going to write this down, so my email will be up at the end of the presentation, and feel free to email me and I can send you the link to this information. So these are kind of our areas of uncertainty that we want to focus on, and we feel that moving forward, based on the discussions that we've had with our stakeholders and regulatory advisory groups, that we need to start thinking about how we're going to answer these questions, and that we feel that getting answers to these questions is really going to shape some of our draft policy options. And here's a summary of what we see as the next steps on the more immediate horizon. We're going to continue to work on these draft options. Some of our stakeholders have expressed interest in developing their own proposals, and they're actually working in a small group to do so. They would like to work with us, and we plan to eventually have some kind of a joint meeting between our stakeholder advisory group and our regulatory group, maybe early next year, where we can kind of share some of the different ideas. But they're working kind of on their own to develop a proposal. And so we're going to continue to refine our options based on the input that we get from stakeholders in our regulatory group and our management. We're going to continue to work with SWRCB to make sure that we get the best science possible for this project. And another thing that's going on that you'll be hearing about at the end of this panel is that our San Diego Regional Board is working to develop their own biological objective program, and Chad Laughlin will be talking about that. So we hope to work with them and coordinate with them as much as possible as well. Okay, so switching gears. So what I wanted to talk to you about is some of the progress that's been made with using the data and the CSCI in our statewide integrated report. These are the integrated reporting categories. For those of you who don't know how this all works, we have these 5 categories and some subcategories, and categories 4A, 4B, and 5 make up what is the 303D list. Everything that falls into the remaining categories, they're not subject to board approval, and they're considered to be informational categories. And so category 1 is one that I want to talk to you a little bit about. And our former category 1 said that all core beneficial uses are supported. And we previously did not have any water bodies in category 1 due to the way that we assessed for that particular category. So for example, we had core uses, which we call our drinkable, swimmable, fishable uses, the things that apply to those uses. And if we didn't put a water body in there if we didn't assess all of those core uses. So for example, if there was a fish consumption beneficial use and we didn't have tissue data, we didn't put it in category 1 because we hadn't technically assessed that core use. So that led to some conversations about how do we get some water bodies into category 1, and that was in line with the US EPA's long-term vision for assessment, restoration, and protection under the Clean Water Act, which is to focus more energy on looking at water bodies that we might want to protect and not just looking at the water bodies that need restoration. So initially, the conversation about redefining these categories started with the idea to put our reference water bodies for the CSCI development into category 1. And while that was going on kind of in the background, we also redefined the category so that any other assessments where we had looked at every beneficial use that we looked at was showing to be supported, that moved into category 1. So we've redefined it now to say that all assessed beneficial uses are supported and no beneficial uses are known to be impaired. But category 1 was redefined, and before that even happened, as I mentioned, our management made the suggestion that we put the CSCI reference water bodies in there. So the change in the definition of category 1 allowed for the inclusion of minimally disturbed data reference sites that were identified in the development of the CSCI. And this change has also opened the door for other high-scoring water bodies where no other data shows impairment or where we have no other data to be included in category 1. So it was really this idea that inspired us to redefine these categories. And so as a result of that, we now have over 450 water bodies that are in category 1, and about 20% of those are based on those reference site bioassessment scores that I talked about. And it was a really complicated process. It seems like, oh, you just make this decision and all those water bodies end up in that category. Actually, there was a lot of work that had to happen. There was a lot of mapping and review, and then some entry into our database that had to happen, and several folks in this room today were involved in that effort, and it took a lot of time. So just, I can't thank you all by name, but I just want to acknowledge that effort because I think it was really important work. So I feel that having water bodies in category 1 is a big deal. Even though it doesn't have the same legal ramifications that the 303D list has, it is still significant to have a summary of water bodies across the state that water quality managers can refer to as waters thought to be fully supporting beneficial uses. So we've never really had anything like that before. And then the other big increase in our use of data is to support 61 303D listings for benthic community effects. So this is where we had CSCI scores that were below 0.79, which we used as our evaluation guideline, from 2 sampling sites or from the same site over 2 years at least, that had additional data showing the water body was impaired for at least 1 other pollutant, and that water body was listed for benthic community effects. And I wanted to point out that the data initially that we received, because it was all the way back in 2010, was all IBI scored data, and our management really wanted to incorporate the use of the CSCI into our process as much as we could. So Calvin Yang, I don't know where Calvin is, somewhere he's probably, hey, there you are, right in the front. Calvin Yang went and reassessed all of our swamp IBI scores with CSCI scores, which was a tremendous amount of work just so that we could put that into our integrated report. So thank you, Calvin, for that. And So, but as I said, it was a lot of work, mostly for Calvin, or other people too, but he did most of the work, and what we felt that was important. So I just wanted to show you a quick map of where, I just asked Stephanie Bucknam in our GIS unit to put this together yesterday afternoon, but I just wanted to give you an idea of where these Category 1 water bodies are. So there, you can see they're kind of spread out throughout the state. And one thing I should mention is that the last cycle that we just recently did with our integrated report did not include regions 1, 6, and 7, which are now going to start their integrated reporting process. So there may be some data gaps here, if you might notice that. Although some of the, at least for the Category 1 water bodies that were based on reference sites, that would not be included for those regions. And I know you guys like graphs, so I wanted to show you how much we've increased our use of bioassessment since 2006 when we started tracking the lines of evidence in our water quality assessment database. I knew we were using a lot more bioassessment data, but I was even surprised when I queried the database just to see how much more we're using. And this number is only going to continue to grow. I just asked Calvin to help me again yesterday to figure out for this next round of integrated reporting for regions 1, 6, and 7, which for those of you who aren't familiar with the numbers is the North Coast region, the Lahontan region, and the Colorado River region. There's about 800 bioassessment samples that we're going to be looking at just for those 3 regions in this next integrated reporting cycle. So that's really great news. And here's my contact information. And I just wanted to end my talk by saying that when I was presenting here a couple of years ago, I ended that talk by saying that we were planning, that our goal was to really take bioassessment to the next level. And I think I can safely say that I feel like we're doing that. And I understand that it seems that this policy development might be moving at a somewhat glacial pace, but as you can see, some important progress is being made, and I look forward to sharing more of that progress with you in the future. Thank you.